Sir, as a citizen of this country, can government access my data? How many bank accounts I have? How many demat account I have? What are the transactions in my bank account?
See, the government is extraordinarily powerful, and the government, there's almost nothing the government can't do if it puts its mind to it. Uh, I think your real question, and the only question that I have the ability to answer, is can they do that using the DPI that we have built? Or does the DPI give them any greater opportunity to do this which they can already do? And the answer is no. In order to do that, uh, they would need to have a centralized database. Because if you bank with HDFC Bank and they come to HDFC Bank, they can order HDFC Bank to give them pretty much anything HDFC Bank has to agree, depending on what it is. If you're a terrorist, there are many ways in which they can ask you. But without doing that, does DPI allow them to do this? The answer is no. And that is because of the answer to the earlier question. We have federated our data. All the bank's data is with the bank. The bank can only move the data to another bank with your consent. Now, with the data protection law coming in, even the government cannot cannot take your consent or volunteer your consent to move the data under the DAPA framework. Can they do it the old-fashioned way? Yeah, of course they can do it. They've always been able to do it the old-fashioned way. And if you want to be afraid of a number, everyone's afraid that other number will go around. I'm more afraid of my mobile number. Because my mobile number is where all the OTPs come. My mobile number is which is everywhere. The banks have my mobile. If the government wants to really, they don't need to use a DPI. They can basically go to TRAI or they can go to the telcos. Remember, we've only got 3 telcos left in the country. We used to have 17 at the height. Now there are only 3 people they have to go to. The telcos are more than willing to give up information and they make no pretext about it. So, your mobile number, I would be more protective about my mobile number than my other.
Everyone, my name is Asavari and I welcome you all to the second session of Day 1 of Vidarbha Literary Festival 2024. We had a wonderful first session where renowned journalist Vijay Lokpalli, he spoke about Virat Kohli and his journey. And now we have another very interesting session coming up. So last few years, India has been majorly digitized, and when digital revolution hits any country, we know that there's lots and lots of data uh, available to that country. And what happens to the data, how it works, how everything is processed, a bit complicated topic, but very interesting one that we are going to discuss. But before I introduce our moderator and author for the session, I would like to thank our partners who helped us organize VLF 2024. All right, so now coming to the introduction of our moderator for the session. Our moderator for the session is Mr. Likhit Agrawal. Likhit is a senior product engineer at Razorpay, a leading fintech product company. Beyond the professional realm, he is passionate about community engagement and storytelling. On weekends, he runs his own library, connecting with people and sharing inspiring stories. So one of his notable achievements in the development is the development of a Telegram vaccine tracker from scratch, which generated an impressive 36 lakhs plus subscribers. This project led to an opportunity which is now being acquired by Healthify Me app. So let's put our hands together for Likhit Agrawal. And now I would like to introduce our author. So our author is Mr. Rahul Matthan. Rahul ji writes at the intersection of law, technology, and society. So his latest book, The Third Way, India's Revolutionary Approach to Data Governance, explains how India's powerful digital public infrastructure conceals within it a powerful data governance framework that could hold the key to many challenges of the digital age. It discusses how, by embedding legal principles into the code of the digital infrastructure and building them in accordance with a set of clearly defined design principles, could offer a new approach to ensuring data protection and competition. So, please put our hands together. Now, I request Likhit to kindly escort our author in front. Before we start our session, I request everyone to please put your phones on silent mode and do not take any calls when the session is in progress. If you must take a call, there's exit right behind you. You can go to the lobby and speak. I also request all the technical crew to please put your mobile phones on silent mode. Thank you so much, and over to you, Likhit.
It's afternoon and welcome to Nagpur, Rahul.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How was your Nagpur till now?
I mean, I've visited Nagpur before, but only on the way to a wildlife sanctuary. So it's nice to actually be in civil lines and see the real city. I wish I had more time.
You have visited Kana, Pench, and all these sanctuaries?
And then
or-
Tadoba as well.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
that's what I do in my spare time. If I can, I go to a wildlife sanctuary, and I like taking photographs. So I'm a one of the things that I do in my spare time is wildlife photography.
Beautiful. Uh, but what you have done and what we are here for, we are discussing for your book. I read your book completely, and I think it was a trigger for me to start knowing on these concepts, on knowing what is data governance, what is regulation, and all these keywords. The way you have written the book is written in a very simple format where a tech person like me can able to understand the legal terminologies, or anyone who doesn't understand legal terminologies is still able to understand what is being written in the book. It's a very lucid manner that it's been written. I'm very happy that I got this opportunity to read this book and to start my journey towards knowing more about data governance and all these things. Uh, I work in a fintech space, and I create applications using APIs given by the government or someone. Now, for example, if we are doing payments through UPI, I'm the person who is building on top of it. But before building it, there is a list of regulations which has been given to me by the regulator named RBI. So, my first question towards this angle comes here is, we already have regulators for payment. We have RBI. For telecom industry, we have another regulator. So in this data governance journey, we already have a regulator, but still your book says a revolutionary approach. Can you throw some light on this?
Sure. And I mean, I don't want to make it complicated. So, I know we're throwing out words like APIs and technology and regulation. But the book is a very thin book. It's got a lot of photographs. So it's designed to be readable. And so I hope that what I say today will not confuse you. The way I think about this, and I'm a lawyer who works in the technology space, all of us know that technology is everywhere. All of us have smartphones. All of us are, using technology for payments. We're using technology for all sorts of things. But still, we know that many harms are caused by technology. I don't know how many of you have seen that deepfake video of Sachin Tendulkar that's been going around. But like this, there are many other harms that are happening. When we are at a time when all of us prefer to use UPI than cash. And quite frankly, I don't remember how much cash I have in my wallet because I don't need cash at all today, no matter where I go. I don't need a wallet. Once I went to Delhi and I left my wallet behind and I used DigiYatra to get onto the flight.
Correct.
I had Aadhaar on my mobile phone. I had cash. Even if I had to give someone a tip, they had a QR code and I could give them a tip. We don't need anything other than digital. But at that time, when so much data is being collected from you, that data can be used for harm. And I think we all recognize that because we all get SMSs selling something or someone will call us for something else. In fact, a lot of my friends say, is my phone listening to me? Because when I'm having a conversation with my friends, suddenly I'll get an advertisement for something that we were talking about. Now, at a time like this, regulations alone is not enough. Because the problem with regulation is, as you know, we have a data protection law, which is a privacy law that was enacted in September last year.
Correct.
But I drafted the first version of that law in 2011. So it takes this long for laws to become actually enacted. Technology, on the other hand, changes every 6 months. Last year, we didn't know anything about AI, and then ChatGPT came, and everyone here has tried ChatGPT at least. Something. You just tried it.
Yes.
6 months. That's how quickly it changes. And the AI Act that Europe had drafted had to be rewritten in the last 12 months because it had to take into account this new technology, which is ChatGPT. So the idea in the book is that if we continue to use laws to regulate technology, we're going to fail. If it's going to take you 10 years to draft a privacy law and it's still not in force, how are you going to react when technology changes at the speed of AI and at the speed of the internet? And the argument in the book is that if our entire life is going to be defined by the technology we use, can we not embed regulations into the technology? And this is not a new idea. 20 years ago, a professor from, he was in Harvard at that time, but he's now in Stanford, called Lawrence Lessig, came up with this idea in a wonderful book called Code and the Other Laws of Cyberspace. This is at the dawn of the internet. So he's a far more visionary thinker than I could ever be. But India, with its digital public infrastructure, has made it possible to embed laws into code. And this whole book is about how India has done it. It explains the various technologies that you all use, but if you read it, it tries to give you the sense that many of the principles that we would like the laws to have in place to protect us have actually been put into the code of these various digital public infrastructure that we use. And part of the reason to write the book was really because all the various different ways in which governance and regulation takes place have been invented in the US and in Europe and other places. This particular approach, what I call the techno-legal approach, was invented in India. We don't know about it. And we must be proud of the fact that we have made this significant contribution to the way in which these regulations take place.
Correct. You talked about tech, you talked about DPI. DPI is public infrastructure. So before that, I want to take you 10 years back, or I think 20 years back, correct me if I'm wrong. There was this name called India Stack, where all these things were started, digital journey started. So was this the main place where our Indian public infrastructure started to grow? And from that particular point, we introduced Aadhaar into our system. We planned to create UPI. So I wanted to, if you can share some light on what was this India Stack and why we started with this why we plan to start with our digital public infrastructure journey.
So the word digital public infrastructure didn't exist until, I'm going to say, maybe a year and a half ago. The first time you really heard it was over the G20. There is another word which has existed for a very long time called digital public goods that has a very specific economic meaning. So we couldn't use that word to describe what we have built because it was slightly different. But yes, 15 years ago in 2009, we embarked on this journey of building a digital infrastructure which was different from the way the rest of the world had done it. It started with Aadhaar. So 2009, roughly speaking, is the time when they say that Aadhaar started. The first DPI that we built was our identity infrastructure. Why is this important? If you want to interact with people online, you're essentially interacting with faceless people. When you're interacting with someone at a shop, you're seeing the person. In the real world, you're interacting with the person over a period of time. But if you're interacting digitally, you're not seeing the person. And so you have to identify who it is. And so the very first piece of infrastructure that you have to build when you're looking to digitize is identity. so that you can know reliably who you are interacting with. So in the book, I have a different categorization from DPI that most people have. I call it access, engagement, and empowerment. And the access layer is identity. So if you go to the digital space, to the medical space, now we have the ABA medical identity number. And that will allow you access to the medical digital system. And similarly, in various different systems, you have these access layer. It's the identity to allow you to access that system. Once you have an identity and you are allowed to access, and once many other people have an identity, you can engage with them. And that is what I call the engagement layer. The best example of the engagement layer is UPI. So, you work for Razorpay and Pine Labs and these sorts of companies. These are the interface between
Correct.
the various people who are identified and what they want to do. And there are many different examples of this engagement layer, including ONDC, which is the Online Network for Digital Commerce. That allows us, it's like Amazon, but that allows us to interact with people, buy goods and services, and pay, using UPI or any other facility. And so once you've got an identity, you can engage. Once you've engaged for a long period of time, that's when you can use your data to empower you. And that, to me, is the third layer of the digital public infrastructure stack. And in India, that is reflected in the DEPA architecture. The DEPA architecture it's an acronym for the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. Currently, that has been implemented in the financial services sector. We have what we call account aggregators. And essentially, I'll very simply tell you how that works. If you have any sort of information in a financial sector entity, for instance, if you've got your transactions in your bank, which talk about what you've paid and for what you've paid, if you do not have collateral for a loan, let's say you do not have land or you do not have a vehicle or something like that, but you still want a loan, how can you use the history of your transactions to convince someone that you are eligible for a loan? It should be possible. Now, if all our transactions are in cash, there is no evidence. But if, as for the last decade or so, our transactions have all been on UPI, there is a digital trail that is being built. Now, if this digital trail has been built, if all those businesses that did their transactions using cash and couldn't get a loan because there was no evidence that they actually have a robust business, if they could use these digital trails and go to fintech companies or even professional, big banks and say, you want to know that if I take 20,000 rupees from you in the morning, I will return it to you. Can you see this history of my UPI transactions for the last 10 years? Every day I have earned more than 20,000 rupees. Is that not enough comfort for you as a lender
Correct.
to give me a loan? Now, this is not going to be possible if I just sort of show you my transactions. But what if I link every bank to every other bank, every bank to every fintech company, and create a digital framework where, with your consent, you can instruct your bank to share your last 6 months bank statement with a lender who wants a last 6 months bank statement. It's possible for us to digitally sign it so that there is no doubt that this is a message coming from the bank. This is not a photocopy that I could have done some Photoshop with and changed my the amount I earned. This is directly coming bank to bank. And if I do that, couldn't that lender have the confidence that, yes, this is a person who for the last 10 years has earned enough money, I can now give them a loan? This is how the engagements that you have at the engagement layer of the stack can be used to empower you at the empowerment layer of the stack.
Correct.
And your question on what is India Stack, see, India Stack also is a term that came about afterwards. We never started Aadhaar thinking that we will build this entire stack from start to finish.
Public infrastructure.
I don't think we thought about it, but certainly we behaved with the ambition to deliver on this. Because the foundational characteristics of Aadhaar and of every other example of digital public infrastructure that we have in this country has been built almost as if we thought at Aadhaar that we would have DEPA.
Got it.
And that's what the book talks about, the various design principles and the various institutions, etc., that we have created in order to give rise to this. Now it seems completely seamless, but I know because I was involved in the very early days of Aadhaar that it was, yes, of course, we thought maybe we could do something like this, but no one ever thought that it would become what it has become today. Just a few statistics. UPI today does 12 billion transactions a month.
It's very huge.
They are going, and you can see now it is basically, they've gone 50% of the way. They're going, their ambition is 1 billion transactions a day. And that is remarkable. In volume terms, we will outstrip MasterCard globally, I think, by the middle of this year.
You are an amazing storyteller, I tell you. And similarly, in the book, he has explained everything in a proper story fashion. I want to know, we created digital public infrastructure. You talked about engagement, empowerment, everything. I want to know how we have reached to the bottom of the pyramid. Here I'm trying to ask is village area. We are all are lucky enough to have 5G cellular network running in our phones. We have a good smartphone, but what about a segment of people who are in the village area? And how is digital public infrastructure working for them, or we have seen any flaws while penetrating in village area?
So, look, you got to understand that when we created Aadhaar, the ask was to give 1.3 billion people a unique identity at a time when no one in the world thought this was possible. The problem statement was given to MIT and Harvard and the biggest universities in the world, and they said that the computers haven't been built to, at scale, deduplicate 1 million people a day against 500 million people in the database. I just want to explain what I mean by that. If you are a new person going to get an Aadhaar, your biometrics, your 10 fingers and your iris, needs to be compared to every person on the database to check whether you have already been enrolled. When we started this project, no computer existed in the world to be able to do this. But we built it anyway. We built it because we believed in the power of silicon. And the power of silicon is that every 18 months, it doubles its capacity. This is Moore's law. Gordon Moore is the founder of the first integrated circuit and the chip. And he predicted this, and it is still true. It's becoming harder to do now because we're reaching atomic levels at which we're writing. But it is still true. And we believed in the power of silicon that computers will become better. Now, I'm using this story to answer your question because when we built Aadhaar and UPI and things like that, we had 250 million smartphones in the country. At that point in time, and if you think about India, I've written in the book, India is actually divided into 3 Indias.
3 Indians.
India 1 is the India that all of us are in. That is an India where you can afford to fly to some place, you can have a smartphone, you can enjoy your life, etc., etc. That is 300 million people. That's just short of the population of the United States. India 2 is 400 million people. And these are people for whom, yes, they have data, but data is a necessity. They just use it for what they need. Very often they go to the railway, go to railway stations and use the free Wi-Fi there. There is another 600 million people, and those are the poorest of the poor. Today, India has 750 million smartphones. Smartphones today you can get for 4,000 rupees a smartphone. When I got my smartphone, it was close to 60,000, 70,000 rupees. So once again, when we build technology, we shouldn't build it saying, oh my God, this technology is not going to reach people who are underprivileged or who don't have access. We must build it with the confidence that when we build it, economies of scale will ensure that it gets there. Now, having said that, you asked for the flaws. When we rolled out Aadhaar, there were many instances of people not being able to access things that they used to access because now access was limited to those who have Aadhaar. In my book, I talk about instances of people who die of starvation because their Aadhaar was not linked to their ration card. Happily, those instances are radically diminishing. The statistics right now are that those are radically low. Should it have happened? No, absolutely not. It absolutely should not have happened. But is that a reason not to build digital technology? I completely disagree. Because if you look through what was happening before we built the digital technology, and you all know this because you've experienced it some way or the other in your own life, LPGs, the LPG cylinders, the database had 20% ghosts. What are ghosts? People who are dead and on whose name LPG cylinders are still being collected, or people who never existed at all. And the only way to eliminate this is by using a unique identity to deduplicate those extra people. Now, there's a good chance that some of you are also participants in this ghost system. But you know that once it is linked to Aadhaar, it is not possible to do. So, net, I think it is absolutely important to build these sorts of digital systems to allow greater efficiency in public administration. And one of the things that the India Stack and all of India's DPI has done has enabled this. The final thing I will say is that it is possible to build digital infrastructure that can be accessed non-digitally. We all have seen QR codes. I don't know how many of you have used the offline authentication mechanism allowed by Aadhaar. So today Aadhaar will give you a QR code which has been digitally signed by UID, which is actually as good evidence of your identity as your Aadhaar card. In fact, probably better, because the Aadhaar card you'd flash and any of us can just use Photoshop and make something that looks like an Aadhaar card. You cannot duplicate the QR code that has been issued by the UIDAI. Why is that powerful? Because that can be printed on a piece of paper. It is got the validity of actually accessing UIDAI's database, but on a paper that any of us can print. We all have seen how when we make payments using UPI, we actually just take a photograph of a QR code and we can magically make the payment. So that person who perhaps does not have enough data to be able to check to see if that payment has been made just needs to show the QR code and they will know. So it is possible to also build digital public infrastructure that can be accessed non-digitally. And I would say that we have to take these two things. One, the faith that technology will eventually reach that small village.
Correct.
Two, build the technology such that even if it doesn't, we can use this technology in an online, offline kind of a matter. I think with both of those, we can achieve a lot.
We don't know, we have just finished our half an hour, but I have many more questions to ask. I'll directly jump to the recent question where we recently seen G20 and everywhere it was on newspaper. And there was one headline which got stuck me, ki in G20 we promoted a digital public infrastructure, and I have seen comments from other countries where they want to use a digital public infrastructure. Is digital public infrastructure will be served as a software as a service to other countries, and how is it easy to get enabled for other countries on digital public infrastructure? Can you just quick
Yeah, no,
thing?
this is an excellent question and sort of very much up to speed with some of the work that I'm currently doing. So the G20 was a great opportunity for India to showcase what it had built. And I was involved in the process as the DPI advisor to the Ministry of Finance. So I spent a lot of time in the GPFI track, which is the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. And in that process, I had the opportunity to listen to many other countries talk about their digital journeys. And they all have wonderful stories. Brazil has got a payment system called Pix, which is just like UPI, perhaps even better. Saudi Arabia has got a DPI for the Hajj, which comes about just at the Hajj. And it is a DPI, which just allows you to do payments and find places to stay and where to go and things like that. So there are many stories like this around the world of countries that are doing this. But the most powerful session for me was the Global South session. We had a Global South side event in the Hyderabad meeting of the GPFI where we called many countries from around the world. And the African Union was there. The African Union represents 1.3 billion people. If you think about it, they're equivalent to the population of India. And first of all, the African Union was extremely grateful to have even been invited. As you know, eventually Prime Minister Modi took the step of inviting the African Union to be part of the G20, which is a remarkable step for inclusion because this is 1.3 billion people. But what they were telling me at the conference was digital is the only way that Africa will pull itself out of its poverty. And they looked to India's example because the Bank for International Settlements, which is the RBI of RBIs, did a report which said that India achieved in 9 years using digital public infrastructure what would have ordinarily taken it 47. And by actually building this sort of digital public infrastructure, India could leapfrog many stages of development that the rest of the world has already gone through. And Africa looks at this and says, we have to do that same thing. We have no choice, we have to do that same thing. And so India has this opportunity, India has this tremendous soft power, that having built this digital infrastructure, we can actually shape and change the rest of the world. And the G20 was the platform for us to show the world that we could do this. But it's not easy. Over G20 and subsequently I've had the opportunity to speak to many countries. Vanuatu, for example, has a population of 25,000 people. There are 75 countries that have a population of less than 1 million. These countries do not have the economies of scale to be able to do what India did. We have 1.3 billion people, so we can roll out Aadhaar. It's a very costly infrastructure, but when you have 1.3 billion people, it works out. It doesn't work out for a country which has only 1 million people or 100,000 people, and there are many countries like that. Togo, for example, is a bunch of islands. The two main islands, their biggest problem is that whenever a ship lays anchor, it chops their undersea cable, and one island or the other does not have internet. How do we build digital public infrastructure under these sorts of challenges? So the challenges are basically twofold. Technology capability, do they actually have that capability? And economies of scale, do they have a population size that is large enough? Now the one way that we can do this is actually what you said. We are now looking, and there's a paper that will be out probably in the middle of next month called DPI as a Service, or DAS. Wow. Where we can actually offer countries, just like you sign up for Gmail today, offer a country, do you want an identity system? Yeah, we can give you an identity system. How many people you need it for 100,000, 200,000 people? We can enable 100, 200,000 people, and we can give you all the ability to control it. We will put it up on the cloud somewhere. I don't know if you know this, but DigiLocker that we use today is actually running on AWS.
Correct.
And much of our DPI today is cloud ready. The two that are not are UIDAI and NPCI, Aadhaar and UPI. Because we have the technical capabilities to have a UIDAI, which is one of the foremost technology companies in the country today. The amount they use AI, etc. And NPCI is the same. But every country does not need to have this. Other countries can do this sort of AWS style DigiLocker if they want. And we can reach more and more people. They don't need to have the technical capabilities of doing this because we can build these and give it out to them. And part of the work that I'm doing as a lawyer is also packaging the laws, the regulations, and all of those things such that they don't even have to do that. They can just amend their existing laws to enable an Aadhaar type identity or to enable payments using digital UPI type equivalent, or even enable this data sharing that we're doing with account aggregator and DEPA. So we think that this is going to be India's soft power, that India can either itself or bilaterally with countries like, already France, the US, and the EU have signed joint statements with India committing to work with India to promote DPI. And we could certainly do it through the Quad or through any of the other kinds of institutions. But certainly, this is India's soft power for the future. And I'm telling you, I'll just give one example where it's extremely powerful. And that is what we call government to persons payments, G2P payments. When there's a disaster, the government wants to quickly send money to people who are affected. India's perfected this. When COVID happened, we created a G2P system pretty much overnight. We connected our subsidies with our bank mapper under UPI with identity, and we were able to transfer more money overnight to people than any other country has been able to. I had the opportunity to meet the Treasury Secretary of the United States, and she said, we are still mailing our COVID checks to people. And they mail it by check. So now, this is what countries want. At the time of an emergency, they want to be able to access people really quickly. It's only when you really need it that these sorts of things count. And why India can do it is because, and go back to the name, it's because it's infrastructure. Once you've built infrastructure, you can very quickly change the infrastructure to achieve whatever new thing is required. No one knew what COVID was, but we were able to use our existing infrastructure to build COWIN, an app that tracked who had been vaccinated, which dose of vaccination, what vaccination. And we could do it pretty much over 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was the quickest way. I'm very happy and I'm very proud to say India is doing good. We all are the users of one or the other way of digital public infrastructure. We are using DigiLocker. Many of you might have traveled from Mumbai, or Hyderabad, or Delhi airports, and you might have used DigiYatra to get quick access to inside the airport. And for sure, everyone has used COVID to book their vaccines. Some or the other way, we all have used digital public infrastructure, and this digital public infrastructure has taken India, I think, way ahead of in the world. And the second point, post G20, this will be given as a services to other countries too. So it's such a proud moment to say ki a country where we had so many issues, so many problems, still we created a system which will help our own citizens as well as other countries too. With this, I just want to quote as an ending remark a quote from his book itself, a beautiful quote. Thank you for selecting that quote in the book. And also, I want to add one fun part. Post reading this book, I have started reading the terms and conditions. Post reading terms and conditions, I've clicked I accept. So this is a change what his book has brought in me also. A small thing, but yeah. So the quote says, Internet is the first thing that humanity has built, that humanity doesn't understand. The largest experiment in anarchy that we have ever had. It's a beautiful quote with a deep meaning. So on this, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rahul sir.
Thank you so much, Rahul sir and Likit. That was such an insightful, wonderful session. Now the forum is open for everyone. You can ask your questions.
Recently, the Economic Times about this data handling.
that year, that on 27 December, 1 million transactions being made. And it is monitored by the central depository and report to the RBI. But when it is asked to the RBI, they say that they don't have any data. Now in your design principle, how the India or this digital infrastructure will going to take care of when we are talking about transaction in a day of 1 billion? Please throw some light.
So, look, when you work with data, this is the fundamental risk. That if you collect data, that place where you've collected the data becomes what we call a surface of attack, and it becomes a target. And in some cases, it becomes what we call a honey pot. A honey pot is a pot of honey where all the flies come. Now, one way to avoid this is to federate data. So do not create a honeypot. Keep the data where it is, and whenever you need the data, access the data. Don't ever bring all the data into one central place. So one of the design principles that we have used in building DPI is federated data. We've built very powerful pipes to connect them, and that's what I talked about with DEPA. But we have consciously kept the data at the edge. There's only one example of where we've not done it, and that is Aadhaar. And there's a reason why we had to do it in one place, because this is the foundational identity of the country. Other than Aadhaar, and there are many misconceptions about Aadhaar. There is a belief that if you use Aadhaar to sign up to a bank account, that UID has information about your bank. That's wrong. The bank has information about your Aadhaar, but UID has no information about your bank. You are seeding Aadhaar in the bank database. You are not seeding bank information in the Aadhaar database. The Aadhaar database only knows your name, your age, your address, your gender, and voluntarily your mobile number and your email address. These are pieces of data that, quite frankly, if you want to buy a magazine subscription, you have to give. And we do it all the time. So, the answer to your question is federation of data. If you can keep data federated, you reduce the risk. Can never eliminate the risk, but you will reduce the risk. And a lot of DPI has been designed with that in mind. One of the best examples for this really is DigiYatra that I use all the time when I fly. Bangalore is one of those airports that we're lucky to have DigiYatra. If you've ever flown through Bangalore Terminal 2, you actually now don't even need to take your phone out of your pocket. You just walk up to the camera and the doors miraculously open as you walk through. What that does is that on your phone, it has taken an image of your face but converted that image to what they call a vector database. It's just a table with numbers. It then uploads that plus your boarding pass to the airport that you're going to, specifically to the airport, because if I try to do it in Nagpur, it will say Nagpur airport does not have DigiYatra enabled. So it knows that. And then that information, which is just numbers, but which can uniquely identify your face, is in the turnstile. And as you go through it, it will correlate whether this is a boarding pass for today, whether all those various things, and it allows you to go through. And 24 hours after the flight, all of this is wiped out of the airport database. The data never really leaves your phone. And this is the best way to federate data. The other way to do it would have been frequent flyers upload your data onto the government website. Every time you come, don't show your Aadhaar because they already have your data. This is the way the US does it. The US gives you all these easy ways to get into the US. You will sign up to it, of course. It's very convenient. But the US government has your data permanently. It's never being wiped out. And that's why I think this method of federating data that we do in DigiYatra and in almost all the DPI that we build is very powerful.
Any other questions? Yes. Here first, second, and third. I'll come to
No, please use the mic because it won't be recorded in the video.
you. Hi. Basically, right. So I just had I wanted to know what your recommendations would be, say, in rural areas, like based off your experience, the government is, say, setting up digital infrastructure, and it's making digital goods that say help are aimed at improving health outcomes, or providing microfinancial services, or God, I'm feeling nervous. So, in that case, since the government is providing a tool for, addressing a particular problem, and it is providing like the supply of that good, right? But the people, they do not have the demand for it. So, how do you address the demand side problem? And what would your recommendations be on how we can increase, say, the take up or accessibility to such tools?
Oh, excellent question. So, look, I think the unique thing about India, over the G20, I saw many countries with DPI. The unique thing about India is India's DPI is public private. UPI, lots of countries have UPI. Brazil has PIX, and PIX is essentially the bank's digital application. But what India did was we allowed Google Pay and Phone Pay and all the other various companies to actually be the front end interface between the citizens and the banks. Google Pay is not a bank. It's got nothing to do with the bank. All it does is it maps banks but what it does, which is the reason why they say, do you remember the first UPI app? It's called Beam. How much market share does Beam have? Like single digit percent. So that's an app developed by the government. Now the government is very good at a lot of things. Innovation is not one of them. Market outreach is also not one of them. But so if you want uptake in markets, all sorts of markets, you have to allow private enterprise and entrepreneurship to do it. They're the best at it. I don't know what exactly the use cases are, but I guarantee you that if the government tries to do it and the private sector tries to do it, the private sector will do more. So the power of India's DPI is it is very much driven by public-private partnership. And the public part is very important. Because if you look at the place where private sector deployment of technology is most rampant, that's in the US, you can see that all of the digital that now we all access is provided to us by private companies. And as a result of that, Facebook's Cambridge Analytica happens, we've got all sorts of very coercive pricing when it comes to Amazon. Netflix keeps showing us movies that they think we like to see, but perhaps we don't like to see. All of these things happen. But if you can, like India has done, have the government prescribe the protocols of the infrastructure and have the private sector take that and deploy that out to the public, you're going to achieve the best of both worlds. Because when the private sector is misbehaving, the government that has control over the actual protocols can tweak the protocols. A very good example, we haven't implemented it, but we can, is that NPCI said that we do not want any one payment operator to take control of more than 33% of payments in the country. This was before WhatsApp Pay was, at that point in time, they were against WhatsApp Pay. And I always told them, look, just quietly let WhatsApp Pay do it, because let the three fight among themselves, right? That's the way to solve this, instead of... But if they wanted, they could have tweaked the the UPI infrastructure to somehow make it such that we could share this information one-third, one-third, one-third. Among whoever it was, if WhatsApp wasn't there, WhatsApp or someone else could be there. Why is that important? Because we prevent monopolies. Right now, 86% of all payments in the country are undertaken between PhonePe and Google Pay. And that may not be good for us. What if PhonePe and Google, they're both American companies. PhonePe now is owned by Walmart. What if they just do some arrangement amongst themselves, then 86% of all payments would be controlled by one conglomerate, and that may be dangerous. We never have that problem in this country because we control the protocols. And there is nothing that they can collude among themselves to do that would prevent us from avoiding this monopoly situation. So that is, I mean, I hope I've answered the question. I think the point really is that we need to build public rails, but if we want to really do market outreach, we need to use private innovation to do market outreach.
Yes.
Next question.
Next.
Thank you, Rahul. It has really been wonderful. My question to you is, you've already talked about it, these days people say that Google knows more than what we know about ourselves. So in these days when does our DPI system that we are creating, and you've said that we may market them soon as a company, how can uh, these prevent us from any malpractices or some frauds, including Google and other platforms that we have? So data security, that's the question.
So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and it sometimes scares me how much technology knows about me, but sometimes it's actually very useful. Because gave that Netflix example, but sometimes it's nice to know what's the next movie to watch, or sometimes it's nice to know what's the next book to read, or I bought something and they will suggest, Acha, you interested in this? This may be another interesting product for you and it's on sale right now. All of us enjoy this. Now, this is the trade off. This is something which is really useful to us, but you cannot have this without them knowing a lot about you. What India is looking to do to slightly mitigate this, because see, if ever you want, you can also go and live on an island and say, look, I only want to go to a bookshop and buy the book physically. But then, that bookseller, you've come 5-6 times and he starts recommending books to you, which I love. I love it. I really love the fact that there's a human being who knows what I would read. He's seeing all the books and he can say, now this is the book. And Amazon's algorithm is just that. What we don't want is for Amazon, and let it not be Amazon, let it be just anyone, is one entity around the world that is the only entity that has this level of information about everyone who uses them. That may be a little dangerous, because this is an entity that, I mean, Jeff Bezos answers to no one, Mark Zuckerberg answers to no one. These are people who are controlling everything. They're not elected. They can't be thrown out. Extremely powerful people. And that is a bit scary. So India has built ONDC, the Online Network for Digital Commerce. And essentially what ONDC does is it tries to, without creating a platform, a single platform, give you the benefits of network effects. Now, what is network effects? Amazon benefits from network effects. All these players benefit from network effects. That is that when all the buyers of products or services are on one platform, all the sellers want to go to that platform. You obviously want to go to the one place where you can get the maximum number of buyers. Now, how do you replicate that without creating a platform? That's what ONDC has done. So ONDC is a protocol-based Amazon, where you can have multiple seller apps. If you're a seller, you can just make your entire catalog. If like you're a kirana wala, whatever is in your store, you can just make a list of it and put it on what they call these seller apps. And all the seller apps can be aggregated in various ways, whichever way you want. There can be seller apps that are only specialized in oranges from Nagpur. Who knows? They could, whatever you want to do. And then you have a bunch of buyer apps, and all of us, and today it's live on in some cities, I don't know if Nagpur is one of them, but you can go to Paytm, and in the Paytm app, there is an ONDC section where you can actually go to that app and buy from an ONDC seller. So what Paytm is doing, anyone can do, you and I can do. We can build a seller app of something specific that we want, go to all the people who are selling it and curate them, and then we can find our own buyers. We can go to the buyer apps and say, look, Paytm, I've got this curated selection from Nagpur. and we can do that. Now, this is what India is contributing. What India is contributing is the ability to get network effects, but without the harms of network effects, where one single entity gets control over all the knowledge about everything. It's still only just starting. And if you look at the early days of all our DPI, the growth is very, very gradual. And then suddenly there's a hockey stick, and then it sort of takes off. And I was using UPI before the hockey stick, and it was very boring to use UPI because you got these apps and there's nowhere to sell it because there's no one who's willing to take it. You all remember. Perhaps over COVID is when it really exploded, but before that, it was just a curiosity for us. There's no place to spend it. I remember the first wave of COVID, I said, okay, after that I was going around, I could start using it everywhere, but if you go to a mall, you still have to pay cash to the car park guy. They hadn't figured that out. Now there is literally nowhere you go where you can't say UPI, they'll give you a QR code and you can pay. So that's what's going to happen to ONDC. And if you think that Amazon and all of these things are unbeatable, I would just say that we thought that MasterCard was unbeatable. In its 25-year history, Visa and MasterCard have circulated 6 lakh POS terminals in the country. We have 5 times that amount of QR codes in the country today, merchant QR codes in the country today. So that's the power of DPI.
Yes, any more questions?
One last question.
Sir, as a citizen of this country, can government access my data? How many bank accounts I have? How many demat account I have? What are the transactions in my bank account?
See, the government is extraordinarily powerful, and the government, there's almost nothing the government can't do if it puts its mind to it. I think your real question, and the only question that I have the ability to answer, is can they do that using the DPI that we have built? Or does the DPI give them any greater opportunity to do this which they can already do? And the answer is no. In order to do that, they would need to have a centralized database. Because if you bank with HDFC Bank and they come to HDFC Bank, they can order HDFC Bank to give them pretty much anything HDFC Bank has to agree, depending on what it is. If you're a terrorist, there are many ways in which they can ask you. But without doing that, does DPI allow them to do this? The answer is no. And that is because of the answer to the earlier question. We have federated our data. All the bank's data is with the bank. The bank can only move the data to another bank with your consent. Now with the data protection law coming in, even the government cannot cannot take your consent or volunteer your consent to move the data under the DAPA framework. Can they do it the old-fashioned way? Yeah, of course they can do it. They've always been able to do it the old-fashioned way. And if you want to be afraid of a number, everyone's afraid that other number will go around. I'm more afraid of my mobile number. Because my mobile number is where all the OTPs come. My mobile number is which is everywhere. The banks have my mobile. If the government wants to really, they don't need to use a DPI. They can basically go to TRAI or they can go to the telcos. Remember, we've only got 3 telcos left in the country. We used to have 17 at the height. Now there are only 3 people they have to go to. The telcos are more than willing to give up information and they make no pretext about it. So, your mobile number, I would be more protective about my mobile number than my Aadhaar number.
Everybody has a Google Pay on the mobile number. It's very like recently, only 3 days back, I got a call that by mistake I transferred 20,000 on in your Google Pay number, and please transfer me that. And have you received it? And they literally sent a message on my mobile that this much has been transferred, and I just checked it. And luckily, my husband was there. I asked, did you ask somebody to transfer money on my Google number? So it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Well, at least here you're receiving money, so I don't think you should be complaining.
Yes.
Can we go to next question, please?
The last question of the session.
One last question.
Thanks, Rahul sir, for such a wonderful insight into the digital public infrastructure. As someone who's working in the regulatory space, a bunch of questions crop my mind. But given the time limitations, I just have one, which seems like a pressing and a more blanket question to all the questions of mine. Is along with digital public infrastructure, I believe there's also a necessity for digital literacy, as I might put it. Digital literacy is something which would truly empower us as citizens and to be harnessing the best out of the public infrastructure that we've created over time. So, as a Q tip from you or as an advice from you, what is something that we can take back from this session which would help us understand our not only just our rights but also the best way we can harness? Of course, reading the book could be
I was
one
just going to
thing.
say, read the book. It's
Yeah,
like
I
a
was
thin
gonna
book.
say. But other than that, if there are any ways to make ourselves more aware, regardless of our backgrounds, whether or not we're technical or not, because as you said, we're adopting Google Pay and other infrastructure-related services every day. So, what's the way to be more aware of it?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I just want to plug the book again. The idea of the reason why I wrote the book was because many of these questions came. And everyone has seen the manifestations of the digital public infrastructure, and they had these questions in their mind about security, about surveillance, about all of these things. And particularly given how much we're using it, people are starting to get worried. And so the book was really to explain how it's built and to sort of talk about many of these. In fact, there are chapters where I talk about all of these things, surveillance and exclusion and all of these things, and try and explain it to say that, look, this is happening, but then there is this as well. And look, I think, a couple of things. Be completely aware of what is happening. So the example that you gave, if someone sends you an SMS, be aware that there is a particular way in which these SMSs come. You've seen it, you know what it looks like, it comes from a particular ID. Also be very careful that what you're receiving, it's very easy to create some sort of a Photoshop thing that looks like you've received some payment. I've seen this happen. So this is my job, or my day job is really to do this sort of stuff. So I've seen a lot of that. But there are, the kinds of frauds that are being perpetrated are highly sophisticated, and millions and billions are being stolen from companies. When it's reached this scale, hundreds and thousands will also be attempted to be stolen by smart people. There's no real way in which laws or regulations or policies or technologies can be 100% cure to anything. Largely because just as every time we see a fraud, we try and tweak our technology, our regulation to address the fraud so it doesn't happen. There are 5 new frauds that are being created, and as someone's thinking about it at the same time. You can never get a 100% solution. I find that I am rarely, I'm going to say this, I'm rarely defrauded, and tomorrow something's going to happen to me, so I don't want to jinx it. But the reason why I inoculate myself, and this is the only piece of advice I will give you, is because I am skeptical. If you can have healthy skepticism, nothing in the digital world is going to fool you. If something appears real but doesn't seem to be logical, like if you see a video with Sachin Tendulkar saying, my daughter earns 180,000 rupees every day from an app called Aviator Sky Quest. It looks like Sachin Tendulkar, it speaks exactly like him, but have you ever heard Sachin Tendulkar talk about his daughter in this way? So then shouldn't you doubt that this is not real? And if that is the case, do I need a new law for deepfakes, or can I just inoculate myself with my own skepticism? And that's all I would say. I think we all know what sort of sounds fishy, and we all have enough friends, like, you asked your son or whatever, is this real? That's the way we have to get along with life, because they are trying their level best to trick us and fool us, and they've been trying their level best for centuries. So there is nothing new about this. It's just a new way of doing it. Technology is just a new way in which they can fool you. But we have survived this for centuries. We will survive this as well. And believe me, DPI is nothing. The artificial intelligence changes that are going to come. I have a feeling that that will be my next book as well. So when those changes come, I would say we would really be scared.
Thank you so much, Rahul sir. We are really looking forward to your next book. Thank you, Likhit, for moderating the session so wonderfully. And I express my gratitude that you accepted our invitation and became a part of VLF 2024. May I request one of our patrons, Honorable Hemant Lodhaji, to present a token of love, a memento to Rahul Matthan ji. This card is curated by Mandira and it represents one of the iconic monuments of Nagpur city. And Hemanji, I request you once again to present a goodie bag to our moderator. Thanks a lot.
Stop keeping the wallet. Anyone can raise the hand? There are 2, 3. Still, a lot of digitization is yet to come. I have stopped since 5 years. So far, not landed any time in any problem. Thank you.
And if you wish to get your copies of books signed from the author, we have the signing desks, one in front of this hall, Laburnum, and the one behind the author's lounge, which is downstairs. So please don't forget to buy the books and get them signed from the author. Thank you so much for becoming a part of VLF. Thank you.